Today's video, we're going to talk about using segmented customer lists for each campaign you're running in your Google Ads account for extra profit, okay? If you don't know what customer lists are, using the customer match system inside Google Ads, you can actually take customer data that you've acquired, basically sales that you've gotten offline through a brick and mortar store, or it could be sales that you got through your online store, but because you haven't set up your conversion tracking the right way, you're importing them into your ad account so that the machine learning that Google uses to decide if your ad should show up for a certain keyword that you're bidding on or not, it will take into account the customer list, not only just to see if the person that's searching is on that list, decide if the ad shows or not, but does the person searching have traits similar to past customers you've had before, which is where the main value is with customer lists. And this has been the case that they work extremely well to increase your results for a few years now. However, there's almost nobody talking about the nuances to the customer match list upload system where you could upload segmented customer lists. Namely, not instead of just one customer list, or maybe getting a little bit more fancy where you upload the email opt-ins you have and then customers a separate list to get some extra data, which we do often. But the customers that buy separate things, people that buy pants versus shirts, separating your customers into two separate lists, upload those to Google Ads so you can get even better performance out of your campaigns, namely because you can actually add the customer list, pants buyers, to your campaigns that promote pants, specifically within the audience menu of the account. That's specifically what I'm talking about in today's video, and what we found through the case study I'm going to share will actually increase the profitability of your ads, with the idea being that you label the customer list well so the algorithm kind of knows what it is, and you add it to the campaign on a campaign level so Google knows what you're trying to do for the most part. So I'm going to go through what this process is so you can replicate it for yourself on your end and give you all the little tips and tricks and information you need to know to replicate the same results that we got with the current client we're still working with, but in the past, what results we got doubling our sales and profitability growth with this particular account, which is basically what it did. So before we get into the content though, I am Corey. I'm an owner of Guaranteed PPC, an online advertising agency that specializes in guaranteeing results for their clients. That is, we do not charge our clients management fees until we can get them a certain minimum lift in the profitability up front in excess of our management fee. We are the only agency out there doing anything of the such, which should tell you something about the quality of the information you're receiving on today's video. So with that said, okay, now the first thing, I explained how the customer match system works and what we're going to be talking about on this video here today. I will tell you that for the most part, you probably won't get that much change in your results unless you have lots of brick and mortar sales that you're generating that Google wouldn't know about that you're going to upload to the system. You have a brick and mortar store, in other words, and more than 10% of your sales that you get overall between your in-store and your online store come from the brick and mortar store, because you're going to be able to give data to Google that they don't have. More data always means more results. That's the golden rule with conversion tracking data and customer data in general. So the other thing being, of course, if you haven't, for whatever crazy reason, had your conversion tracking set up correctly yet, you could actually upload your customer data to have Google see all the customers that you should have been tracking with your account settings, but they are now going to get it. The other thing, by the way, would be if you get most of your sales from organic traffic, organic rankings on Google, you can get some benefit uploading those customers to your account, particularly if you don't have Google Analytics tracking set up so they wouldn't quite know those customers if they bought or not exactly. That would be another situation where this particular method is going to help you out. Or if you get a lot of sales from another online source other than Google, Microsoft, or you get lots of sales from social media ads that you're running. In any case, it won't hurt uploading this extra customer data to your account. All I'm saying here is your mileage will vary. Less data they are aware of that you're able to upload, the more of a sales increase you're going to get using this method. And along with that, if you have lots of different items that you sell that have very different customer types. So meaning, if you sell basically replacement parts for boats, if you will, and the replacement parts for your boats that you supply are all parts for the same model of boat. So essentially speaking, the buyer of these parts are pretty similar to one another, and you're not going to get a big improvement in your results telling Google, hey, this is a person who bought a seat versus a propeller here. You will get some, but the big gains are still going to come from from where you have like a clothing store, like I said, was mentioning before, and you sell dresses, you sell pants, you sell shoes. Given that, yes, people who like buying shoes like buying pants, that's true, but usually there's a very specific buyer who has a fetish for shoes versus likes to buy pants on a regular basis. So in that case, you'll get a bigger gain. And then with that, your gain will increase the larger of disparity of buyers you have from one product category of customer that you're selling to versus another. Such as if you sold home goods, if you will, and you sell, stuff for swimming pools, and you sell stuff like couches, you sell TVs. These are all very different types of buyers, even though it would make sense a store would sell all that stuff because you're selling home goods. There's a huge difference in those type of buyers, namely because a lot of people don't have pools, so they're very unique. They'll have a very unique profile of traits that make them unique because Google's machine learning is going to be able to pick up. They know their users tens of thousands of individual traits that each person has that buys from you, and they can look at those on tens of thousands of different levels. So when you upload your customer list, there has to be correlation between one customer and another for them to learn anything. And they got to be able to differentiate what those differentiation points are for each customer type in order to get a benefit of having separate customer lists uploaded to the system so they can learn what those individual unique traits are that makes one type of customer unique versus another, so they can ultimately decide if your ad should show up for somebody or not based upon the person searching, having the traits that line up on your customer list for that specific type of customer, if you will. So I know that's kind of a mouthful what I just said, but with that said, the more different type of customers you have in that they're very, very different types of buyers, and the more offline sales that you're going to be able to upload from your brick and mortar store and or different sources of customers that you get outside of Google ads, more of a lift in profitability you're going to get with this method. So with that said, the usual way, as I mentioned, that most people use customer lists and the customer match system to upload customer lists to Google Ads that they don't already have from your initial tracking that you set up through your system to track purchases. You have one customer list and they put that one customer list applied to all campaigns. Just by adding your customer list through the customer match system, Google's machine learning is going to start to utilize it on your behalf to make your ads better. With that said, you can add the same customer list to your audience menu of all your campaigns, and you can do that to adjust your bids, but just adding it to your campaigns like that will also help Google a little bit understand where they should be using it. For the most part though, if it's just one customer list and you're not going to modify bids on the customer list on the audience level of your campaigns, there's no benefit really or point to adding it to each campaign because Google already has that list and they're going to therefore by default apply the learnings from that list that they can get to all your campaigns. However, if you're going to do what I mentioned here, I'm talking about on this video here specifically, you can have 10 customer lists for each product category you sell, and then you can apply that to each campaign that you have based upon what that campaign's set up to promote, which, by the way, is why it's actually a good idea to have separate campaigns for different categories of products you sell. I've talked about on this channel before that when you're talking about PMAX campaigns, which we run PMAX campaigns to run shopping placements for e-commerce brands because it'll run those shopping placements more profitably than a standard shopping campaign by itself because of the additional machine learning that it has with it. Most people are picking this up now. But with that said, if you are that home goods seller that sells stuff for swimming pools and TVs and you have all these different types of buyers, ultimately, you would be usually, assuming you don't already have campaigns that have been running for a while, so there'd be a penalty for, like shutting down that campaign and all the learnings it's picked up to set up a new campaign. If you were starting out from scratch, it would be to your benefit to have a PMAX campaign just for TV products and one PMAX campaign just for pool related product and so forth. Why? Because Google's going to more easy for Google to understand what unique customers that buy each one of those products are when you help differentiate the type of products you have and signal to Google, hey, these types of people are all that are going to search from this campaign here are all related, if you will, versus mixing them all into the same campaign. And then Google's got to basically decide which items do I promote first and foremost, and they don't really understand on the product feed, it does differentiate one product from another, but it's still going to help Google understand it better if you segment it out through separate campaigns a little bit better. We know this because we run separate campaigns for different product categories and it gets better results. So with that said, you will typically do better having it broken out if products at least are very different than one another. If they're somewhat similar, it makes more sense to put it into the same campaign because all the learnings will be piled in inside that one campaign. And therefore you don't have the learnings dispersed across too many campaigns where a certain campaign needs a certain amount of learnings in order to do well. If you're going to go ahead and do that, then the smart thing to do along with it is to take your customer list itself and separate them out. And so you could apply different customer lists to each one of those campaigns for each type of customer that those campaigns are meant to market to. So with that said, just the customers who buy the pools, you would want to upload those swimming pool customers as a separate list through the customer match system. And then with that list, you're going to apply it to the campaign that promotes just pools by itself. Basically, all the data that Google has to look at for that particular campaign, it knows the data to specifically look at. And like I mentioned, I would recommend your customer list should be labeled appropriately. So it should be like pool customers, TV customers, so the machine learning system can properly, a little bit better assess what lists are supposed to be doing what, if you will. With that said, okay, another thing to mention here, generally speaking, if your products are so different that you think you should actually set up separate campaigns for each product category you have like that, then ultimately the customers you have itself, in general, I just want to basically say here, the more different the product categories are, the more you're going to benefit of segmenting your customer lists, if you will. So just know that going in, for the most part, if you have separate campaigns for each product category, you absolutely want to have different customer match lists that you're applying to your different campaigns, because it's going to make a significant difference versus just applying that same customer list to the campaign that's meant to market only an individual product. With that said, that's pretty much it, right? If you have your swimming pool customer list, you apply it to all your swimming pool campaigns. If you have a TV list, you apply it to all the TV campaigns. You could actually go and try to experiment, like let's say you sell TVs and you have different campaigns for different brands of TVs. You could segment out your customer list and then with that apply the right list to each campaign that technically markets a different model of TV, Samsung, LG or whatever, and you may also get some performance gain. You're just not going to get the same level of performance gain as somebody, like the swimming pool stuff versus the TVs, because there's a bigger difference in customers from one list to another, and therefore the traits that make up the buyers are going to be so much different from one another that the machine learning is going to learn a lot more from your list versus the people that buy a Samsung versus LG. The customer list and the traits that make up those people are going to be very much similar or the same as one another, even though there will be some differences. So with that said, the case study I mentioned here, that what we did, we had a women's clothing store that sold women's clothing, and about 2/3 of their sales would go through the online store, and then about 1/3 of the sales for this client got was just the offline sales. So I mentioned that because, like I mentioned earlier in the video, the higher the percentage of missing data that you have, the more you're going to benefit from this. That is, the more sales that occur offline and the more sales you get from outside Google sources, from sources other than Google. So with that said, we segmented all their products into 7 distinct categories, which if you sell a bunch of different items, like for women's clothing, we could have separated this out into 100 categories, like dresses that are pink versus dresses that are blue. You don't want to do that because you're going to spread out your learnings too thin across all your campaigns. And like I said, the differences in the buyers from the red and the pink dresses aren't going to be that much different. It's not going to make much of a difference anyway. And then you're going to have the downside of having to have separate campaigns for those, of which will spread out your learning. So you want to break it out on a high level only for the maximum effect from using the strategy, and to not go backwards instead of forwards with your result. So we broke it all down to 7 categories. Dresses, like pants, shoes, all this. It wasn't exactly that, but it was basically on that level. That's the level that we broke it down, okay? With that said, I talk about, by the way, first of all, just to let you know here, I talk about all the time for e-commerce brands especially, and it doesn't just apply to e-commerce, and there's other YouTubers that are starting to talk about this. John Moran talks about marketing efficiency ratio. What you should be really doing, but especially with e-commerce brands, is instead of looking at the return inside your Google Ads account and the internal tracking that it provides, telling you what your return on an investment is, because it undercounts conversions so much and doesn't count in repeat purchases and referrals and an effect on organic traffic and yada, 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 yada. What you want to do is judge your Google Ads performance based upon the ratio of total sales in your company versus ad spend, okay? And then your idea is that you find a ratio there that's acceptable acceptable. And then your goal is to keep raising the spend, let's say 15% a quarter, while raising the sales 15% a quarter. And then you just keep walking up your quarterly results like this. And it's a much easier way to do it because, like I said, Google Ads tracking is great for determining one ad's better than another, but it's horrible at telling you what your return on investment is. It's not even set up for that because of how cookie tracking works and the inherent flaws in it. And the more expensive whatever you're selling is, the worse it is. So with that said, we were using the marketing efficiency ratio method to judge our performance and to scale, which for the most part, all e-commerce companies should be using the MER ratio to scale their ads. So this clothing company had a 32% basically increase in year-over-year sales in terms of the marketing efficiency ratio that we're primarily using as our tool to judge if we're on course in growing this company's profitability through the Google ads that we had. And this was actually after 5 years of working with this client already, because I've mentioned on other videos how your journey of getting your Google ads to work for your clients, if you're working with clients or your company in general, you'll get much higher increases in year-over-year sales increases at the beginning, and then it'll start to taper off over time. Why? Because you're picking all the low-hanging fruit that's available to you early on. And even though, your percentage gains get smaller, your sales increases are actually going to be as good or better, because going from 1 million to 1.3 is much better than going from 60,000 to 90,000, even though the percentage gain is actually different in that case itself. So with that said, at that point, we were getting about a 30 or so increase, specifically in this case, I checked it before we ran this experiment, so because I wanted to make this video, a 32% year-over-year increase when we looked at the last month before we set up this experiment, if you will, versus the same month the previous year. Okay, so with that said, we segmented all the customer lists out into these 7 categories, and any campaigns that were meant to target certain these same product categories, because the 7 categories matched up with what campaigns, how we broke things out on a fairly high level, if you will. So we created basically mirror audiences for each campaign. We set up the audiences so that they would be added to each campaign as a signal if it's a PMAX campaign, and on a search campaign, we added it as an audience. Okay. Then once we implemented it, like you're going to have to do this is not an immediate gratification strategy here. You're going to have to implement it, and you're going to have to give the machine learning time to take the data, internalize it, do some testing, and then realize how to utilize it, basically, what they got. So 180 days after we implemented these audiences on all the different individual campaign levels, I came back to check the results that we were getting, namely the year-over-year sales increase that we were getting for that month, given that sales in this market's highly seasonal, so you can't compare 180 days to the following 180 days because it'll skew your data. You have to literally look at May versus the previous May, or June versus previous June. And what we found after a full 6 months of giving this time to stew, giving Google a look at the data, interpret it, use it, test it, we were up to a 67% year-over-year increase in MER ratio. So 67% increase in when you take the total company revenue divided by ad spend, what that ratio was, i.e. the MER ratio, is 67% 180 days after implementing these audiences to each one of our campaigns, versus what we had before, which is just the overall sales uploaded from their brick and mortar stores to their ad account and utilizing it on an account level only. Okay, so basically it doubled our year-over-year increase in sales, which is massive. Okay, and naturally, I will certainly say in this particular case, the results are probably really good because, namely because a lot of the customers that shop offline were giving Google the customer data to shop online, so that when somebody searches online for a dress, our ad's more likely to show up. Google had this data before, but now they can utilize it so they know, okay, this is actually a dress customer. So this particular ad from the dress campaign should show because they're an actual dress customer versus a non-dress customer, if that makes sense. That's where I'm sure most of the increase in sales actually came from when we implemented this customer list system, if you will, itself. But with that said, we didn't just break out, just to clarify, we did not just set up the customer list from offline only itself. We also took into, and we're with this particular company, taking all the customer data that they had in general. So if any sale did not come through Google Ads, we were also uploading it to our account. So offline, sales to the brick and mortar retailers that they were in, which they were in like stores like Ross and stuff like that. All that data was uploaded along with any other traffic sources online that's not Google Ads. We also uploaded it. And that was the way that it was before we ran this experiment and added and broke the list out into certain categories and then added the categories to each campaign individually. In general, what this also says is just how important machine learning is with Google Ads data nowadays. And furthermore, just how much of it, how you should be really taking and utilizing the best strategy you can use with customer lists instead of just randomly just sticking the list in there and say, okay, we're done here already, if you will. The other reason why this lift certainly would have happened as well is because we can add the customer lists on a campaign level, and we can also add bid adjustments on those particular campaigns. Now, with smart bidding, they're pretty much going to ignore the bid adjustments if you add it to your campaign. Just know that going in. With that said, though, if you have manual bidding, you can do the bid adjustments itself. And on some of the newer campaigns that we were running at that time, because we were getting into doing a lot more search ads at that time, we were able to add a significant bid adjustment on those audiences to kind of help things along, and that contributed some to it. Even though I want to say that's probably 10 or 20% of the total increase in MER ratio year over year that we got, but I certainly want to mention it anyway. With this case, I was actually blown away by seeing the results here. I did not expect we would get this much increase in results. For that matter, our results certainly were slowing down a lot because we picked all the low-hanging fruit already in that first 5 years of working with the client. We're really searching for different strategies we can use to push things forward. This came up, so we utilized it, which is normally what you want to do when you're advertising. You want to look for that next big overall idea, implement it, give it time to mature, bring the next one in, and so forth. So our year-over-year results, 30% year-over-year increase in sales is actually really good still, but it could be supercharged. You just get your customer list data set up right, and you apply it to your campaign so Google knows how to interpret the customer data. Instead of just sending a customer list, here's all our customers, and that's it, because they really don't understand when you give it an email address saying this person bought, what they bought, how much they bought, and so on and so forth, if you will. There's some other stuff you can also do with customer lists, by the way, which is you upload only your whale customers. If you had, 5 million customers, instead of just uploading that into one big customer list as well, you could actually find people who bought more than once and then upload that customer list only to your account. And then I would also go ahead and do it by product category as well. Pretty much, based upon how I break my campaigns up, because, you got to add it at a campaign level here in order to utilize separate lists for separate categories. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. But, people, for your dress campaign, having the customer list of people who bought more than one dress, that certainly could be better than just anybody who bought a dress one-off, for one wedding. And they normally don't buy dresses, and they're never gonna buy dresses. So you could be even potentially better doing that as a tweak to the strategy. I haven't tested that yet. So, ultimately at some point we'll test it, and maybe I'll make a follow-up video about that. But, and then with that said, if you're not sure what to do, you can always reach out to me at guaranteedppc.com, and I can have a conversation with you about it, either to do the work for you to set this up correctly, or do a coaching call, and we can talk about how to actually get the results that you're looking for, or anything else that's stopping you from getting the next bit of results from your overall ad campaigns and program. Because I am really good at looking at not only campaigns, but websites, pricing strategy, because I work with business owners all the time, and that we have to work through these issues to get their ads to work. So if you're interested in that, you can also reach out to me at my firm, and we can do a coaching call if you want. We also sell ad templates. If we've already worked in your niche market already, you can actually buy the winning ad template from us that works for your niche market. Whether, this video is mainly about e-commerce, but it also works for service companies. You can certainly have separate customer lists for each service that you promote and do the same thing for a service company. But in either case, we've worked in over 100 different niche markets. And if we've already got you the results you're looking for in your niche market already, take the template that we developed, campaigns, landing pages, ads, copy paste it into your account and get the same results we're getting or have gotten with none of the time, money, and effort it took us to figure it out. And we can tell you the results you're going to get with it up front. So if you're interested in that, you can also reach out to me at guaranteedppc.com. We have those available. So with that said, okay, again, taking your 30% year over year increases in profits from your ads and make it at 60 by uploading your customer list, I certainly don't expect this unless you have a lot of customer data, and there's a big difference in customers from one type of customer that you sell to versus another. Some of you guys, I want to say the average is probably going to be 10-20%. However, the potential is there. So you certainly want to try it anyway. For the amount of time and effort it takes for you to break out your customer list like this, then upload it and then add it to your campaigns so that each campaign gets the most relevant customer list possible, which can be done probably probably in an afternoon, certainly. You certainly want to do this, and your competition's not going to do it, so it's actually going to give you an edge versus some other things your competition does by default. It's pretty hard to make money from it when everybody does the strategy. I mean, everybody runs shopping ads. Shopping ads are not going to be that profitable until you figure out a way to run shopping ads better, and that's how Google Ads is set up. You versus the other guys, and whoever does the best ad setup knows the most wins. Beyond that, if you want to know the other things that will make you win by default, because ultimately that's what it's about, you want to watch this channel and subscribe to this channel, and because I have all the methods that you're going to need to outdo your competition, no matter what it is, who they are. Over a decade of experience running ads on Google, on Facebook, online, doesn't matter basically where you want to run ads. And I go over the stuff that works as well as doesn't work, like I did on this video here on this channel as my specialty for this channel. So if you're going to learn from anybody, you want to learn from me because I have actual direct experience. Most YouTubers that are talking about this stuff don't actually run ads, or they run a couple ads and they don't really do much. I promise you that's the case. It's a bunch of people full of hot air for the most part. And I know that because I know what they're saying and it's not really accurate and just has great editing and that's it. So you just should subscribe if you haven't already. You should also check out my blog at guaranteedppc.com/blog. My blog has even better information on it with step-by-step instructions, with screenshots, everything you need to use, our strategies that we're using to guarantee results for our clients, for yourself. If you have any one-off questions about anything I covered here today, you can always leave me a comment below as well. I get back to every single person who leaves me a question or comment on this channel, usually within 24 hours time. With that said, I'm going to wrap it up with that. Hopefully that made a lot of sense how I explained it. Hopefully it wasn't too technical. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up with that. See you later.
Remember when I said customer list was important during this video? Well, this video here tells you how to do it.